Your Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Good morning. Welcome to this high-level conference which opens the European Year of Development 2015. My name is Paul Strauceps. I'll be the moderator for the discussions today, but the true significance of this event is most vividly demonstrated by all the eminent leaders you see before you here on stage today who have come to participate in the launch of this event and of the European Year of Development. Each of them has something important to say about the meaning of development cooperation and why this year is especially vital in developing and furthering our goals in this important field. And so without further ado, I invite the Prime Minister of Latvia, Laimdota Straujuma, to open this conference. Ms. Straujuma, please.
Cienījamie klātesošie, pirms es sāku savu runu, es gribu lūgt mūs visus uz mirkli klusuma, pieminot tos cilvēkus, kas gāja bojā Francijā. Lūdzu. Paldies. Augsti godātās ekscelences, ministri, komisāri, Eiropas komisijas priekšsēdētāja kungs. Man ir patiesas gods šodien Rīgā atklāt Eiropas tematisko gadu attīstībai. Šis tematiskais gads ir unikāls, simbolisks un iedvesmojošs vairāk iemeslu dēļ. Eiropas gads attīstībai ir unikāls, jo pirmo reizi Eiropas tematiskais gads ir veltīts ar ārpolitiku saistītiem jautājumiem. 2015. gads ir atskaites punkts, kad izvērtēt paveikto kopš 2000. gada, kad visas pasaules valstis apņēmās sasniegt tūkstošgadas attīstības mērķus. Šie mērķi, kas ir vērsti uz nabadzības mazināšanu, veselības, izglītības un vides jautājumu risināšanu, ir panākuši daudz. Kopīgiem spēkiem šajā laikā esam samazinājuši badā dzīvojušo cilvēku skaitu par 700 miljoniem. Gandrīz uz pusi ir samazināta māšu mirstība dzemdību laikā. Gan arī vienlīdzīgs skaits meiteņu un zēnu mācās pamatskolā. Esam nodrošinājuši pieeju dzeramajam ūdenim 2,3 miljārdiem cilvēku. Tūkstošgadas attīstības mērķu sasniegšana vienmēr ir bijusi svarīga Eiropas Savienībai. Eiropas gada attīstībai atklāšana Rīgai ir simboliska, jo Latvija ir viens no visredzamākajiem piemēriem attīstības sadarbības efektivitātei un rezultātu ilgtspējai. Pēc neatkarības atjaunošanas Latvija līdz ar vairākām, jau ilgadējām Eiropas Savienības dalību valstīm saņēma atbalstu no citām valstīm. Šobrīd Latvija ir viena no visstraujāk augošajām ekonomikām Eiropas Savienībā. Ir NATO dalību valsts un ir ceļā uz iestāšanos OECD. Tik veiksmīga pārejas pieredze bez Eiropas Savienības un citu valstu atbalsta nebūtu bijusi iespējama. Dāmas un kungi, cienījamie klātesošie, šādi veiksmes stāsti ir nepieciešami visiem. Latvija ar savu ekspertīzi un pieredzi, jo īpaši atbalsta Austrumu partnerības un Centrālāzijas valstu attīstību. Tādēļ man ir patiesas prieks šeit redzēt Grūzijas premjerministru Irakli Garibašvili, un Kirgistānas izglītības ministri Elviru Sarievu. Mūsu pienākums ir stiprināt šo valstu izvēlēto attīstības ceļu, palīdzēt tām savus mērķus sasniegt ātrāk un ilgspējīgāk. Eiropas gads attīstībai ir iedvesmojošs, jo Eiropas Savienības pilsoņiem ir pienākums zināt un būt lepniem par padarīto. Par Eiropas Savienības sniegto atbalstu cilvēku pamatiesību īstenošanā. Un tas būtu demokrātiskā valsts pārvaldē, izglītībā, dzimumu līdztiesībā, cilvēku cienīga darba, ūdens un pārtikas nodrošināšanā. Tieši tādēļ man ir prieks, ka šī gada laikā par sasniegtajiem rezultātiem mēs runāsim kā lauku reģionos, tā pilsētās, kā skolās, tā uzņēmumos, kā bibliotekās, tā kinoteātros un sporta laukumos. Lai šis gads veicina mūsu iedzīvotāju aktivitāti un iesaista labākas pasaules veidošanā. Dāmas un kungi, draugi, attīstības sadarbība ir katras valsts, katra individa pienākums. Tā ir cilvēcības un solidaritātes izpausme. Mēs esam daļa no pasaules ekosistēmas. Mūsu interesēs ir miers un stabilitāte pasaulē, rūpes par vidi un cīņa ar klimata pārmaiņām, ilgspējīga ekonomiskā izaugsme, kā arī nabadzības un epidēmiju izskaušana. Šis gads, lai kalpo par iespēju katram eiropietim izvērtēt savas valsts un Eiropas Savienības kopīgo devumu mūsu pasaulei, mūsu cīņai un jo īpaši mūsu nākotnei. Un līdz ar to Eiropas gads attīstībai tiek atklāts. Paldies jums visiem!
Thank you, Ms. Straujuma. And next, to continue this opening of the European Year of Development, I invite Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, to speak, please.
Prime Minister, Madam President, Ministers, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, je suis heureux d'être en Lettonie aujourd'hui, as it seems you are not fluent in French. But French is one of the official languages of the European Union. Some of the Europeans have forgotten that. I want to restore the influence of the French language, because it's a beautiful language. Je sais être démagogue à mes heures. Je suis content, heureux d'être aujourd'hui en Lettonie et à Riga, parce que pour les Européens et surtout pour ceux qui viennent de l'ouest de l'Europe, Riga n'est pas une adresse neutre. C'est le symbole, comme je le disais hier soir, de la réunification de l'histoire européenne et de la géographie européenne. Il y a quelques années, sous la présidence de Madame le Président, j'avais l'occasion d'assister à un sommet de l'OTAN. Hier, nous avons officiellement lancé la présidence lettonne et aujourd'hui, dans cette ville, symbole pour tant de choses, et ville et pays et nations énormément performants, nous ouvrons l'année européenne du développement. C'est la meilleure adresse que nous ayons pu avoir pour ouvrir officiellement l'année européenne du développement. One of the priorities of the new Commission is to strengthen... You can take off your headphones. One of the priorities of the new Commission is to strengthen Europe as a global actor. Europe can only be a global actor if Europeans understand how the role of the European Union and its member states benefits us all in our interdependent world. And since 2015 is an important year in this regard, It is very timely to have a European year for development that will seek to foster the direct engagement of our citizens. It is also timely for another reason. 2015 is the deadline for meeting the UN Millennium Development Goals. At the end of this year, we'll replace them with a new global agenda, the so-called post-2015 development agenda. In order to do so, we'll have the third financing for the development conference in July in Addis Ababa and the United Nations post-2015 summit in September in New York. And finally, 2015 is also the year where we are working towards a new global climate agreement in Paris. The UN Millennium Development Goals have guided our development policy for 15 years now. Remarkable results have been achieved. The proportion of poor people has been reduced by more than half. 9 out of 10 children in developing countries start school, and this in equal number for both boys and girls. With the European Union and its member states as the world's most important donor, we can take pride in these numbers. Europe has helped make a difference in the life of millions, and we will not relent our efforts. In a few weeks, my Commission will call for us to collectively renew our support and commitment to the world's poorest. Because there is still a lot to do to ensure that basic human rights are respected. While the proportion of undernourished people globally decreased from the beginning of the 90s to the beginning of this century, this still leaves 870 million people, 1 in 8 worldwide, going hungry. While the under-5 mortality rate has dropped by 47% since 1990, in sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in 10 children dies before age 5, more than 15 times the average for the developed regions. The world we live in is increasingly interdependent. We witness this every day. The challenges we face, be that climate change, migration, radicalism, Ebola, do not know any borders. Our response needs to be united. Our policy must adapt to better face these challenges. In this context, the post-2015 agenda is quite simply an opportunity we cannot afford missing. Eradicating poverty, achieving sustainable development are 2 of the most pressing challenges facing the world today. It is about allowing people to live a decent life whilst respecting our planet. As the UN Secretary General has put it, the post-2015 agenda offers a unique opportunity for global leaders and people to end poverty, transform the world to better meet human needs and the necessities of economic transformation while protecting our environment, ensuring peace and realizing human rights. It's not the President of the Commission speaking, but the Secretary General of the UN, which gives more importance, of course, to the sentence. This is not a small order. This will not happen by itself. At its core, the Sustainable Development Goals and targets will apply to all countries, taking their national circumstances into account. Universality is fundamental. We should recognize that all countries have common challenges and opportunities for a shared future, and that we all need to make concrete commitments, both global and domestic, to make change happen. This means that the European Union will also need to rise to the challenge. This is not a new departure for us. We are already committed to sustainable development at home and abroad and to global solidarity. But we will need to do more, and we will need to do more and better. And crucially, we also need to get others to do the same and contribute their fair share. My Commission will work closely with other European institutions, our member states, and of course our international partners to make sure we deliver. I would like to call on all European citizens to accompany us in these efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here to launch the European Year for Development. It will be a year in which we will see actions all over Europe, in all member states, among civil society and from all European institutions. The motto of this European year we owe to the European Parliament embodies this well: our world, our dignity, our future. Each individual has a role to play for a more sustainable and peaceful world. We want to tell stories from around the world to show that wherever we are from and wherever we want to go, our aspirations are the same: a stable, peaceful world, education for all of our children, jobs for young people, a decent life on the planet of which we need to take better care. Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, ich bin froh, glücklich. Okay. I'll give you some privacy in order to adjust you to different languages. And I'm promising you I will not express myself in Luxembourg, because there are only 2 people in this room who are fluent in Luxembourg. Was ich sagen wollte, ist, dass wir uns vor Augen führen müssen und es im Herzen tragen sollen, dass Europa, die europäische Integration, das europäische Einigungswerk keine Erfindung der Europäer nur für die Europäer sind. Europa hat Aufgaben für sich selbst, Europa hat aber auch Aufgaben in der Welt, denen wir uns stellen müssen. Wir dürfen nicht im Wohlstandsegoismus weitester Teile der Europäischen Union versinken. Wir haben dafür zu sorgen, dass das, was uns selbstverständlich erscheint, auch anderen zugänglich gemacht werden kann. Weil das so ist, bin ich Herrn Andris Gobins sehr dankbar, dem Präsidenten Lettland sehr dankbar, den Mitgliedern des Wirtschafts- und Sozialausschusses der Europäischen Union im Europäischen Parlament sehr dankbar, die Idee, dieses Jahr zum Europäischen Jahr der Entwicklung erklärt zu haben, weil es wichtig ist, dass wir als Europäer, als Vertreter des reichsten Kontinents der Welt uns dauerhaft von der Notwendigkeit neu überzeugen müssen, dass wir eine Botschaft an die Welt zu vermitteln haben. With the active help of all, we can change the way we speak about these global targets. We should all bring this year to life. We have some fantastic stories to tell about our world, our dignity, our future. Let's tell them together. May I now declare, together with Laimdota, the Prime Minister, the European Year for Development open. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Juncker. Development cooperation is intimately tied with foreign policy, and so it's only natural that our next speaker is Ms. Federica Mogherini, the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Please, Ms. Mogherini.
I will not challenge you with my Italian, I guess. President, Prime Minister, Ministers, Commissioners, Members of Parliament, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. 2015 is the European Year for Development, now officially open. And I would like to thank Latvia and the Latvian presidency for organizing this launching event today, and also, and particularly, for the words that the Prime Minister pronounced today about the need to make this year not just a European Union institutions year, but a European year, reaching out to the people everywhere, to the European citizens, and probably far beyond the European citizens, to make it sure that it's a year that involves all, with the help and support and the major role of civil society, starting from NGOs, but also media, think tanks, universities, public opinion in general. 2015 is an essential year not only for development, but for two major world governance processes. Sustainable Development Goals framework that will be renewed after 2015, during 2015, the post-2015 agenda, and climate change negotiations. So the agenda this year is now global and universal. And I think it is a great chance to move away from the traditional North-South logic. We have three challenges in front of us this year, and with this year for the next decades probably. One, whether the emerging economies and other advanced developing countries accept to take more responsibilities in terms of their own commitments and also in terms of support to others in the new framework. Second challenge is for ourselves. It's not only changes in the South that we need. It's also changes in our societies, in our policies that we need in order to be ready for internal changes. It's somehow the next step of what people that work in the development field refer as policy coherence, made also internal. We need to change some of our internal policies, some of our internal behaviors, some of our internal attitudes to make sure that the new framework, the new goals, also tackles inequalities and poverty in the northern part of the world. And third challenge is to address all the dimensions of sustainable development. Ensure a rights-based approach, address structural economic transformation, sustainable management of natural resources, climate change, sustainable consumption and production, gender equality, good governance, democracy, rule of law, as well as peaceful societies and freedom from violence. The UN post-2015 agenda is a case in point for such a comprehensive view. Not only does it combine poverty eradication and sustainable development, it also seeks to address the structural causes for the non-fulfillment of the goals. It has been mentioned in the beginning that we live now in a far better world than it was some decades ago. Still, we know also that some of the goals have not been met, and I think this year is the good chance to look at why the goals that we haven't met yet haven't been met. And the structural causes for non-fulfillment, in many cases, lies in bad governance, inequalities, non-respect for human rights, and violent and unsafe societies. With the Millennium Development Goal framework, we have learned that setting goals can help in mobilizing critical political will and resources for development, and I would underline resources, which are never enough and should be enough, and also further development progress. However, the Millennium Development Goals did not adequately address the way development, human rights, and peace and security interact for sustainable outcome. Evidence clearly shows that violence and security are not only in themselves a dramatic and unacceptable phenomenon in our society, being it in crisis area or being it in the very same heart of Europe. Violence and insecurity have also undermined sustainable development in the attainment of the Millennium Development Goals. On average, it is estimated that a country that experienced major violence over the period from 1981 to 2005 has a poverty rate 21% higher than a country that saw no violence. Without peace, it is also much harder for countries to sustainably manage their natural resources, build resilience to natural disasters. The challenge goes far beyond fragile and conflict-affected states, however, as it is estimated that worldwide each year over 1.4 million people lose their lives to violence. And I think that today it is of great importance what some of us were here, Je suis Charlie, and the minute of silence we have started our meeting with. I think we have to realize more and more how things are interconnected, internally and externally, and how much the challenge that President Juncker just described of our new Commission trying to work hand in hand in all different sectors, being it internal or external, is vital for our own interest and security, not only for the benefit of the rest of the world. But experience also shown that failure to establish legal frameworks consistent with human rights standards, as well as poor governance, can become key obstacles to sustainable development. It will be important, so, to build and strengthen transparent and democratic institutions, especially for fragile states. Effective, responsive, and accountable institutions that deliver services, give people a voice, and uphold human rights and the rule of law are fundamental to free people from fear of violence, provide personal security, and avoid impunity. Taking a rights-based approach across the post-2015 agenda will be a necessity. Along the same lines, let me say one word about the fact that we all know that the empowerment of women and girls and gender equality are essential for progress on poverty eradication and sustainable development. We know that, but sometimes we don't necessarily coherently work on that. When we secure the rights of women and girls, we are not only investing in equal societies, we are also untapping the potential of at least I would say half of the world's population, with a multiplying effect in societies and within societies. The way we deal with these fundamental issues will determine whether we manage or not to take development to another level, to a different level than it has been so far. Now, if we are successful this year, 2015 could become a silent landmark in the world's history. It is a challenge not only for institutions, not only for governments or European institutions or parliaments, it's a challenge for every citizen. We can all do our part, and we should all do our part, because it's not charity, it's our own interest to have a more developed and sustainable world. I would say could become a silent landmark in the world's history, just as 1815 is considered the start of contemporary era. If we are successful in this crucial year, 2015 could be considered the start of a new year, the era where mankind sat together, taking and sharing equally responsibilities to make sure that our planet is maintained for the enjoyment of all, this generation and the future generations. This is what the European Year for Development 2015 is about, and I wish you all to work very successfully together to make it a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mogherini. One of the main goals of the European Year of Development is to involve society, and who better to talk about that than the democratic representative of Europe at the European level, Ms. Linda McAvan, the Chairperson of the European Parliament Committee on Development. Please.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk to you. Prime Minister, firstly, on behalf of the European Parliament, can I thank you for hosting the launch event today? And it's a very encouraging sign of the commitment of you and your presidency to development issues. And I look forward to working with you and your ministers in the coming 6 months. President Juncker, High Representative, the Parliament is delighted that you have put development policy high on the agenda in your work programme for 2015. And I think your presence here today shows that commitment that you have, and that I know we can work together to have a good European Year for Development and lay a strong foundation for the coming years. Now, I wasn't the chair of the European Parliament's Development Committee when the decision was taken to have this year as the European Year for Development. And I was told by colleagues, well, the idea came within the European Parliament. But last night, I went to the 10th birthday celebration of La Paz, the Latvian NGO. And they told me, and I have it confirmed since, that the idea indeed came from NGOs in Latvia to have the year. And they pushed the idea. So I think we should congratulate the NGOs from Latvia. And I think I can maybe pause a moment and say that NGOs are vital to the work on development that the European Union does. And we must support NGO organisations both within the European Union and in the developing countries, because they are vital to delivering the kind of projects and policies that we want to see. Now, as others have said, the European Year for Development gives us an opportunity to raise public awareness and have a big public debate about development policy. As the other speakers have said, 2015 is the year when the Millennium Development Goals reach their target year. And I think we could reflect a little bit on what have we learned over those 15 years. And I think the first important lesson for me is that development policy works. Now, for those involved in the development world, that sounds obvious. But there is a public debate out there where people are saying, oh, we're not sure it works, we can't afford it, you know, we've got our own problems. But I think it really has worked. And if we look around the Millennium Development Goals, we see that we have 2 billion people now with access to clean water, over 3 million children's lives saved from malaria, lifted millions of people out of poverty, real people with real names and real faces, and the aim of the year should be to put names to those faces and make that a reality so people understand what really has been achieved and what has happened. And of course, more needs to be done. There are some disappointing results, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, and I think we should look with some focus on why, as the High Representative has said, why in some areas this has failed. And of course, conflict and problems like Ebola, they even prevent the modest progress that has been made. It stops that happening. So we really need to pay attention to conflict prevention and, of course, continue the work on tackling a crisis like Ebola. But 2015 has got to be much more than a shop window for what we've done in the past. It's got to be a year of action. And the other speakers have spoken about the two key international events that are happening. The work on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, first of all, in September at the United Nations. And now these are universal goals, as has been said by President Juncker. They will apply not just to developing countries, but to all our countries. And that's because we share a common planet and we share a common future. And I think we have to think as the European Union how we are going to implement those goals, which will apply to us as well as to developing countries. And I'm very pleased, therefore, that we have the Commissioner for Development here, but also the Commissioner for Environment Policy as well, because we need to work together across the European Union to have a coherent policy. And I think we need to think about how we're going to make that work after the UN summit in September. And then in Paris, in December, we'll have the global climate talks. And this is crucial for development. A number of years ago, I went with an NGO to northern Kenya, and I met people there for whom climate change is a reality now. They are living now with the consequences of climate change. It's not a future problem which is coming. And it made it clear to me that poverty will never be history unless we tackle climate change. So that has to be a priority, and it has to be linked to the work we're doing on the SDGs. So everybody on this platform has a responsibility to make those two processes work and to get the global agreement so that 2015 leaves a real legacy for development. But during this year as well, in 2015, the European Commission is updating its Gender Action Plan. And for me, one of the most disturbing phenomena of recent years is the escalating violence against women and girls in areas of conflict. We're seeing women's education under attack. We're seeing constant undermining of the progress we've made on women's rights, on our access to education, and our rights to control our own destiny. Now, the European Parliament has shown its determination to stand up for women and girls by awarding the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought to Malala in 2013 for the extraordinary courage she has shown in defending the right of girls to an education. And just before Christmas this year, we gave the 2014 prize to Dr. Denis Mukwege for the extraordinary work that he and his team are undertaking in very, very difficult conditions in the Panzi Hospital in the DRC. And there they treat women and girls who are victims of the violent conflicts. And the things that he told the Parliament brought tears to everybody's eyes. Yes, the appalling atrocities that we're seeing in that country. And so I hope that in 2015, in this European Year of Development, the Commission and all the institutions will work very hard on gender issues, and I hope I can count on your support to make that a reality in 2015. So, 4 goals for me for 2015. that a greater number of people, a greater number of citizens understand our development policy, understand why it's important, can put faces to the names of the people whose lives are saved, and can have a sense of that it really does make a difference. And I think we need to get that through across in our policies. We need to get a wider understanding of the debate on the Sustainable Development Goals, so that people have ownership of these goals and understand what they mean both for the developing world but in their own countries as well. Within the EU institutions, we need to work hard on how we're going to implement the SDGs, how we're going to make sure they really deliver something concrete. They're not just words on paper. We have to have some clear targets, and they have to be monitoring to make sure they're met. And last but not least, I think we should work together to pick up some concrete proposals in our year of development that illustrate the way the EU's values on development work, some concrete projects. I look forward to working with the Commissioner for Development on some ideas in this area. I know there are some ideas already out there, and I think we should work on them. But I want to finish now by recalling some words from Nelson Mandela about 10 years ago, which he said in London, because I think they summarise for me what our year should be about. He said that, like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. While poverty persists, there is no true freedom. And overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. That chimes very well with our motto for the European Year of Development, and I can think of no better person or words to inspire our year ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McAvan. Our next speaker has a special insight into the processes that help development. He is Henri Malosse, President of the European Economic and Social Committee. Please, Mr. Malosse.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, Mrs. Prime Minister, for your kind words and for having asked for a minute of silence for what happened in my country, in Paris, last Wednesday. I was Wednesday in Paris, and you cannot imagine the emotion that it's among the French population. And I would just say thank you to all the Europeans and all the population of the world who express its solidarity. It's not a question for the French, it's a question for Europeans, and for the Western world, but for the Europeans to fight for their value. It was a murder of our freedom of expression. It was a murder against our value, against our way of living. And that's why it's very important that we all together fight against this radicalism, this sort of new fascism or new Nazism, which is a big threat for all of us. So thank you very much. I will now switch, if you allow me, to French. Je vais passer au français.
Let me indeed address you in my mother tongue. Madam Prime Minister, President of the European Commission, Madam High Representative, distinguished representative of the European Parliament, dear colleague Mr. Lebrun of the Committee of the Regions, I would like to say a word of welcome to Mrs. Freiberger, the former president, who is someone who has exerted great influence in Europe. I'm particularly pleased to, at this difficult time, to welcome the Prime Minister of Georgia, who I know is very familiar with our language. I would like to begin by saying that I'm very pleased indeed to be able to join you today for the launch of the European Year of Development 2015 with our colleagues in the European Parliament. In particular, we came up with this new idea of a European year devoted to not an external policy issue, but one that goes beyond the purely internal policies of the European Union. I would like to mention in particular my colleague Andris Gobins, who's a member of the Economic and Social Committee, European Economic and Social Committee, who in his report on the European Year for Development stressed the importance of this initiative in terms of improving awareness about these issues and in terms of building bridges between peoples. And I would just say, you will no doubt be aware of this, and that's something which President Juncker mentioned in his intervention. Andris Gobins, with the along with the European Parliament and with us, came up with this, was one of those who came up with this idea of the European Year for Development. This is an idea which was born in Riga, and I think I suggest a round of applause for Andris Gobins. The issue of development policy is of vital importance. Of course, we are threatened by terrorism, but first and foremost, our enemy is poverty and underdevelopment. Poverty and underdevelopment and the lack of dialogue as well, which create the right environment for terrorism to develop. It is a lack of development and poverty which have led to the problems, the suffering we see. Looking at Mrs. Mogherini, despite the best efforts of the Italian government, many people are dying in an attempt to cross the Mediterranean to seek a better life. All this is due to poverty and underdevelopment. The European Union is and must be based on principles and values. That must be at the heart of everything we do. And what we do in the European Union with our neighbours has to be based first and foremost on our values. Interests, yes, but first and foremost, it has to be based on our values. And that's something we forget all too often. Thank you, Mrs. Mogherini, for mentioning the importance of balance between men and women and principles of equality. These are fundamental principles which we must always defend, not impose on others, but we must respect our own values, and we must respect, of course, the values of others, but we have to defend and put across our values. On the basis of equal dialogue with our partners, we have to remember, of course, what the origins of our development policy. I began working in this field 40 years ago with when we had the Lomé Convention. We were very proud in Europe of the Lomé Convention. I remember when I was studying these matters and I began working at EU level. We very much stress the fact that this is not aid which is imposed from the outside. It was negotiated between both sides on an equal basis. And I think that's something we should never lose sight of. The European Union is a model for regional integration. It is a model which is of value and relevance to the rest of the world too. In our development policy, our values in terms of democracy, participation, a role for civil society, gender equality, involving all parts of society, respect for the environment. All these principles, I think, have to be very much on board in our development policy. In our view, the view of the European Economic and Social Committee, I think we need to have another look at the foundations on which this policy should be built. I'm not going to be diplomatic about this. I think we have got caught up in too much bureaucracy. We provide direct aid to partner states, but where does the money actually go? We need to involve citizens, not just in Europe, but in our partner countries. We have seen a strong rise in the amount of development aid. The European Union is #1 worldwide, but we don't have enough visibility either within the European Union or in our partner countries. We need to reform this. We believe that this reform should be based on, first and foremost, on an equal dialogue about values. And we see how important it is to respect the values of others, but first and foremost, we have to respect our own values. We need a dialogue on religion, on the content of religions and on mutual respect between religions. We have to involve civil society to give more responsibility and give a voice to those who are part of civil society. And we're not talking not just about the intermediaries of civil society who can sometimes get in the way and be very expensive. But we're talking about people on the ground at grassroots level. And these are the people who are best able to ensure transparent, efficient, and effective cooperation, and to give it visibility and to give it meaning in terms of developing decentralized cooperation. We're very proud in the Economic and Social Committee 20 years ago, putting in the Cotonou Agreement, which followed the Lomé Agreement, putting this principle of decentralization, of decentralized cooperation. And that has to be an important aspect. I think we can go, it's already an important aspect. We can go further. And I would say that if we want to ensure that our development aid policy, if we want to make it more inclusive and more visible for European citizens, but also for people in the rest of the world, there has to be a closer coordination between EU-level development policy and development cooperation, that which is carried out by each of the member states. We need to ensure better, closer coordination. What is the point of each EU member state individually having its own development and cooperation policy, which very often overlaps or duplicates what is being done at EU level? It doesn't ensure efficiency, it doesn't ensure visibility, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We have to be daring in this respect. We have to be prepared to go further in a progressive way, slowly but surely, to ensure greater communitarization of development aid. And that's what we would like to see in particular this year, 2015, more aid, but also more dialogue based on our values, on mutual respect, our respect for the values of our partners, but first and foremost of our own values, which we must be prepared to stand up for, to have more trust in civil societies in our countries, but especially in our partner countries. And this European Year for Development, this is something which comes from civil society. And Henri's governments and the European Economic and Social Committee and the European Parliament, but it all began in Riga. So I think we need to do more to communitarize this development policy. What I would hope is that throughout this year, with all the initiatives for this European Year for Development, I would hope that by the end of this year, our citizens will be more aware of what our development policy is all about, how it works, and that it is something we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malosse. We heard about the importance of the regions in making sure that development cooperation is known and understood and supported by all European citizens, and so I give the floor now to Mr. Michel Lebrun, the President of the Committee of the Regions, to talk about this important aspect. Please.
Madame le Premier Ministre,
Madam Prime Minister, Mr. President of the European Commission, Mrs. Vice President, High Representative for External Affairs, dear Commissioners, dear colleagues of the European Economic and Social Committee, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say, first of all, Madam Prime Minister, I would like to congratulate the Latvian presidency of the European Council for having made sure that the voice of local and regional authorities will be heard at this launch of the European Year for Development and in the course of this year. We very much believe that, in fact, and we very much recognize the fact that this idea this year was launched by civil society in Latvia. We attach great importance to making our peoples aware of the importance of development. And for our part, we want to do our part, we want to do our best to ensure that this European Year for Development will have the full support of local and regional authorities working at grassroots level. I would like to stress the three main motivations which have brought the Committee of the Regions into this whole process. We want to focus on our efforts to improve health, education, access to water in particular. These are day-to-day concerns for a large share of the world's population. This requires that local and regional authorities must play their full role in providing good quality services to help combat poverty. Secondly, the legitimacy of European regions and localities can play an important role in ensuring that the European Union will continue to play its full role in providing aid. We are the biggest provider of aid worldwide, and that must continue. We are key partners on the world stage. We exert major influence in this respect in terms of our values and in terms of influencing the choices made worldwide in ensuring development. And this is all the more important in the present economic and financial context. And then the third aspect, the new global challenges, global warming, loss of biological diversity, and so on, require new approaches, new initiatives. And in this respect, local and regional authorities have an important role to play. In 2015, we will have the Paris Climate Conference. And in this respect, we intend to play our full role with the same enthusiasm and motivation. This means that we need, and all this means that we need a new approach for the post-2015 period. We need to find new means, new resources, closer coordination and interaction between the partners involved. So what we would propose is a multi-level approach working. If we don't work together, then we're likely all to lose out and all of us to fail in achieving our goals. I would just say to President Juncker, during this year, 2015, in our efforts to give momentum to this European Year of Development, we will do our best to bring this message, put this message across to our peoples at local and regional level to help create awareness starting in primary schools. And we will want to ensure that our peoples can be proud of what we do in terms of development aid. In addition, the Committee of the Regions will organize a number of events, in particular the decentralized cooperation days. This will be on the 1st and 2nd of June 2015. We will bring together the local and regional authorities of the European Union, of the developing countries, and the representatives of the European institutions and of the member states for a dialogue in terms of ensuring sustainable development and exchanging best practices, which are really our common achievement. And in this respect, we believe that it's essential to focus not just in combating inequalities between countries, but also between the different parts, the different territories, regions, and localities of a given country. We need to enhance awareness, to mobilize our citizens to development issues. We will do this through our Committee of the Regions portal on decentralized cooperation. This will facilitate supply and demand coming together, offers and interests at local and regional level across the European Union. We will be trying to promote decentralized cooperation across the regions and localities of the European Union, and we have been discussing this with our colleagues in the European Council and the other institutions responsible for this matter. When it comes to our development policy, this needs to follow the model that we follow throughout all the EU institutions based on the principle of subsidiarity. And we will achieve better results if all players can act in the fields in which they are most effective and most competent. At the end of this year, of course, there will still be many challenges remaining for the future. But if we can mobilize all our forces over the coming months, if we can recognize the need to find sound responses to these challenges, if this is something which all our citizens can come to recognize, that will have been a major step forward. We will be all the more successful if we can show that when it comes to these key global challenges, we can't get anywhere without bearing in mind the need for sustainable development and cooperation between all levels of government and administration. It's, I think, a reasonable but ambitious goal. It is one which we can attain if we all work very hard. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lebrun. We've heard a great deal about the importance of civil society, and so it's entirely appropriate that this beginning should be concluded by Mr. SeamusJeffreson, the Director of CONCORD, a civil society organization. Mr. Jefferson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister, for the invitation. As is often the case when one is the last speaker, much of what one wanted to say has been said and said better by the previous speakers. Suffice it to repeat that it's not by chance that 2015 is the European Year for Development. It's our opportunity and our responsibility to focus our efforts on ensuring ambitious and transformational sustainable development goals, to tackle poverty, inequality, and to promote basic rights everywhere, and to focus on getting a deal to stop global temperatures rising beyond 2 degrees centigrade, threatening lives and livelihoods. As Linda said, why is this part of the European Year on Development? Because it's with those who have had least to do, least responsibility for increasing carbon emissions, who will suffer the effects most and soonest. So in the European Year of Development, European civil society from across the continent has high ambitions for itself and for its politicians in showing leadership and example on these two critical issues of our time. My confederation, CONCORD, represents major non-governmental development organisations from across the 28 states of the European Union. Our organisations represent millions of citizens committed through their voluntary work, their contributions, their choices as consumers, their work in the four corners of the globe to show solidarity with and fight for the basic rights of the poorest and most marginalised people globally. We want to use this year to highlight a new way of thinking about global poverty, global injustice, and global inequality, and to reach new audiences across the whole EU. To talk about what Europe gives, but also about how Europe lives, and how our lifestyles, consumption, and policies, from trade to agriculture to migration, affect other people in the world. We need to take this conversation beyond this room. Policy changes require public backing. So beyond institutions and policymakers, we see the European Year as a moment to discuss this new narrative on development with people outside our sector and organisations, with young people, environmental NGOs and movements, those promoting the fight against inequality, poverty and social exclusion here in Europe, human rights organisations, consumers, business people, trade unions, and in the newer member states of the EU, like Latvia, where the public has a quite different relationship with development than the former colonial powers of Western Europe. We need to have this conversation with a wider audience to ensure that Europe's tradition of global solidarity continues and grows. Discussing the external policies of the EU in times of ongoing economic and social hardship will not be easy. To do so credibly, I think we need to listen as well as explain and seek to demonstrate the universality of opportunities and challenges we face in the world. Poverty, even hunger, discrimination and inequality, injustice exist and need to be fought everywhere, including in Europe. For us, a successful European year will be one in which we build lasting relationships and alliances with our colleagues across civil society by demonstrating the universality of our message and common cause. Like the other speakers, I also want to pay tribute to some of the originators of the idea of the European year. Andris has been mentioned, Marius Wanders sitting next to him from World Vision and from CONCORD, and also from the European Parliament, and Charles Goerens, Linda, on your committee, who's been very tenacious in making this a European year, and I think we should pay tribute to them for ensuring that we're here today. So we in civil society look forward to an exciting and certainly a challenging year in which so much is at stake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffreson. Thank you to all the speakers. We move on now to the substance of our conference. Thank you very much.